सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Let me start by saying congratulations to all of you and all of us at this brilliant success of Chandrayaan-3. And I know that you don't trust me with explaining to you what happened or decluttering the science or the technology or the engineering behind it or the questions, usual questions as to why are human beings again trying to go to the moon, because they actually landed people on the moon 54 years back when I was 12 years old, right? And then they thought they had done enough of it and the Americans stopped doing it. Russians kept on landing other unmanned vehicles there, but bringing back samples. So now I think many universities in the world, many science labs have samples gifted to them from the moon. So what's left to do with the moon? So why this new excitement? So I'm not the one to answer those questions, but you know what? I have one privilege, which is that I have in our team brilliant people who know the domain in most areas. In most areas, I have people who know that domain better than me. So for science, you know our stellar science team, Sandhya Ramesh in Bangalore, our science editor, and Mohana Basu in Delhi. This is our two-woman science team. Others pitch in every now and then. But these two, and Mona for some reason also has a Twitter handle that says not a scientist. That's her Twitter handle. Check it out. Sandhya's is Sandhya Ramesh. So let me first start with Sandhya, because you are in Bengaluru and closer to ISRO and you've been watching what's been happening. How is this any more significant than any other landing that might have taken place on the moon earlier?
Well, so for a couple of reasons. One is that we haven't really had landings since 1976, since the last Lunar 24. And the mission after that, right now to land, was Lunar 25. And we know that in the middle, China landed a few probes. What is interesting is that we know a lot more scientifically about the moon than we did during the Apollo era, thanks to, of course, a lot of Apollo missions as well as sample returns. So we now have a more clearer understanding of what we want to explore scientifically on the moon. Therefore, the missions that are going now are going with a very scientific purpose, as well as the purpose of establishing the initial base for human bases to come along in a few years, which in fact will start from 2026 if Artemis goes well. So the objective of the lunar missions now is more than just landing on the moon. It is to understand the moon, understand the resources available on the moon. And in fact, we've become the first country to land on the South Pole, near the South Pole of the moon, for good reason, because we really need to explore the South Pole of the moon as well, for which many astronomers have been very enthusiastic about for a long time. So we'll be learning now about the scientific properties of water ice on the moon, cold traps, which are permanently shadowed craters on the moon where the sun doesn't even touch. So we will start to understand the early days of the formation of the Earth-Moon system. And we'll just have a lot of interesting scientific findings now. And this will this will be the first few steps for establishing human bases, both for science, astronomy, commercialization, and to expand into rest of the space in future.
So why is the South Pole so different from the rest of the moon?
Well, so South Pole is really unique in that because of the axial tilt of the moon as well as the angle of sun, there are permanently shadowed regions which aren't really present elsewhere. We know that because of tidal locking and because of the way the moon revolves and rotates, each day on the moon, one day is 14 Earth days. So because of this, there is a lot of cold and a lot of heat. There's this rapid temperature variation that also occurs at the South Pole. And therefore, we are also able to study regions that are always in light, always in shadow. And most importantly, we have evidence that there is water ice at the South Pole. We, in fact, discovered this with the Chandrayaan-1 mission. Both ISRO's Lunar Moon Impact Probe MIP, as well as the NASA payload M-Cube that was on the mission, both of them managed to confirm the presence of water ice on the moon. So now everybody is excited to get at water because in the far future, we can actually envision using the water at the lunar South Pole, both for human sustenance as well as for rocket fuel.
Yeah, so the idea of water being there on the moon, so it's not as if we are now going to steal water from the moon and put it into our water supply systems. What it means is that you can now maybe set up stations there with human beings who can, just as human beings also stay for long periods now on space stations, so you can have space stations located there and maybe also launch from there if this water can be converted into fuel.
So that's the thing with lunar missions, like the bigger goal here is to look at a space outstation of sort, a rest stop where you can, launch, reach and refuel, probably make use of the resources there and then travel further into deeper space. And also like, Sandhya was talking about the South Pole. So it's not just the water, but also other volatile compounds that may have been there since the beginning of our, since the formation of our solar system. So now things that sort of because they are volatile, they will evaporate when the sun comes in contact with that surface. But at the South Pole, this may not have happened. So we will have samples of the moon surface, which actually captures what happened back when the moon was being formed. So it's like a time capsule. So I think that is also another very exciting, set of data sets that scientists are waiting for.
Because I also, as I understand from stories that the two of you have done, that the belief is that the moon was actually a ball of lava, or
It was a part of the Earth. There are different theories that it is basically a rock that separated from the Earth. That is why it is locked with the Earth. So,
it was there was apparently a Mars-sized body called Theia, which impacted proto.
How do you spell it? How do you spell it?
THEIA.
THEIA. Because anything you say, people will Google. That's the reason you must spell.
Okay. So Theia, sometime in the past, about 3.8 billion years ago, probably, or a little less than that, impacted proto-Earth and then exchanged material. So a lot of heavy material that was present in the moon went into the Earth core. Both became Earth became partially molten, I believe, but moon was fully molten. It is the molten moon theory, and it was confirmed, in fact, by readings from Chandrayaan-1.
So, what is this other complexity that I read? That Luna 25 wanted to land on the 21st in a particular place in terms of latitude and longitude, and Chandrayaan-2 chose another place for the 23rd because each one wanted 14 days of sunshine. What is that story?
Well, both of them were actually landing quite close to each other relatively. I think they were about 110 kilometers apart, the landing sites. So both of them would have functioned the same way for the same 14 days. Unfortunately, Luna 25 exceeded its parameters, I think, when they performed a small burn to enter into the pre-landing orbit. And therefore, it crashed about, I believe, 750 meters from where it was supposed to.
So, Mona, I was reading up on lunar missions. And one thing that stands out is how much is the failure rate. So the big space powers, Soviet Union, which first took the lead in space exploration, the great Sputnik movement that shocked the Americans, right? And then the Americans, because they took the lead on the moon. Each one has had multiple failures. In fact, in the case of the Russians / Soviets, in fact, because the last moon mission was 1976, but it was still the Soviet Union. 16 failures or thereabout, 16, 12, like that. So why is it so hazardous to conduct moon missions? Why do so many go wrong?
Right. So to begin with, we have to understand very basics that, the gravity is very different from the Earth. So the physics of what how the object falls immediately becomes very different. And at the same time, you cannot, there's a lag in the amount of time that it takes for the station on Earth to communicate with the lander. And then, even then, like for example, with our lander today, we are not communicating while it's landing. So all of these parameters are already fed into the system. We already know the trajectory. We have to predict everything that can go wrong, and accordingly have inbuilt systems that can respond to those things.
So Mr. Vikram is on his own.
Yes,
Right.
yes, exactly. So that is where I think you have a lot of mathematical modeling coming in. You have engineering coming in. This time you had the lander looking at the surface and then adjusting whether it should land at that particular spot. Is there an obstruction? Will it topple over? So these are a lot of things that need to be taken into account. And I think, like, this is my opinion, this is not something where having this mindset of being in a race really helps, because your particular system has to be ready. You cannot just think about okay, we have to do it before China or we have to do it before Russia. So I think that is where India sort of gained in terms of learning from the experiences of all the other space agencies, learning from its own failure last time. And then, the ISRO chairperson, he just keeps calling it a failure-based approach, where he has said that he thought of all the reasons why it could fail and then brought in,
Because
measures to correct
space
it.
actually is one area where countries compete, but they also collaborate a lot. I mean, even if you go to the movie
Yeah.
Gravity, you can see that
Yes.
astronauts from different countries who may be rivals also collaborating. So space to that extent is very
Yeah.
different, say, from nuclear or missile research.
Yeah. Can I please add one thing to what Mohana said? It is, in fact, I believe, precisely the nature of the Cold War space race that led to so many failures, because there were missions starting from 1959 to 1976 or so. There were multiple missions launching every year. We've had years where there were 3 missions launched from the same country. There was the Soviet Luna program, there was the Apollo program for humans, the Pioneer program, and there was one other NASA program as well. So because of that race, they were constantly racing to send craft to the moon, and there were more than 50% failures. And then since 1976, not only our scientific knowledge, but also our engineering has become so much better. One of the important aspects, as Mohana pointed out, is the autonomous landing, which we've learned a lot from Mars as well. So now we have far fewer crashes, especially of late. The ones that have crashed are typically the ones that are doing it for the very first time. We experienced a failure last time, but then now we were able to do it well. So I think the success rate now will start to go up because our engineering has become much, much better than it was in the 70s.
And when you say our engineering, you mean not just
Humankind.
humankind, not just India's engineering.
Yeah.
Uh, So Mr. Vikram has a mind of his own. Because you said humans down here are not telling it what to do. So does it have a mind? And it's figuring out whether the place is safe to land or not?
Not exactly, but it has like a during the landing phase, there were instructions given, if I in very layman terms, that allowed it to set. It's like a sequence of activities that were already decided before it was sent out. So it wasn't like sequences were being initiated while it was landing.
Right.
It was done while the landing started itself.
Right. So when I see these sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add that what happened then was the LHDAC, the Lander Hazard Avoidance Camera, was able to narrow down where to land so that the spacecraft doesn't topple or end up in a crater. So in that sense, it was autonomous over there. But for the rest of the mission, ISRO will, of course, be communicating with Vikram, not with Pragyan. Vikram will communicate with Pragyan, but the lander can communicate directly to Earth as well as to the orbiter Chandrayaan-2, which will in turn communicate to Earth.
Yeah. So when I see these lists of failures in the past, one of the things that intrigues me, Mona, is saying that it failed because of overperformance. So,
So,
in space business, what is overperformance? I thought underperformance was always a problem.
So I think it's talking about the thrust of the engine, where it's more powerful, like than what is required. Like I said, it's all about the gravity of the moon. Here, to push something up or to keep something hovering, you need more power because the gravity is stronger. On moon, the same thing.
Right.
That thrust needs to be a lot lower. So that's where your mathematical modeling comes in, where you have to know precisely how much thrust to provide to reduce the speed of the craft while it's
Yeah,
landing.
so to that extent, it's not so essentially not different from landing a plane, because as a plane comes to airplane comes to land, you reduce speed, and altitude comes down, you reduce speed even more. And if
But
you don't do that, you can go wrong.
in the case of an airplane landing, we have a very good friend, that is friction,
Right.
which is missing when you're trying to vertically land something
Right.
in a place that has no air, like very little air drag as well.
Right.
So it's basically just it's the whole control is very different from what you would have on Earth. We understand the Earth and its atmosphere, its gravity a lot better, and that is something we're still learning about the moon.
So
Exactly. Apart from, sorry.
carry on. Go ahead.
Airplanes also have a braking system and they can use parachutes. Parachutes can be used in places like Mars where there's a little bit more atmosphere, not necessarily on the moon. And we rely on thrusters, which is an entirely different science than braking systems. Thrusters are rocket science.
So, in fact, we saw today when we were watching this live, and the one thing we saw was how speed was being reduced at every step. There was a thing on the left corner, and we'll try and show you a little clip of that as we are talking on our screen, of how it showed the reducing velocity. So you were
Yes.
slowing it down for a gentle landing. Now tell me something. This, first of all, you two women, you have to complain with all the other women that everything has a male name in this one, right? So Vikram, Vikram, Pragyan, right? Why is it not Pragya? Why is it Pragyan?
That's a good question. We would like to see more women and more women's names.
Yeah. So that point should be made.
Absolutely.
But that said, now this Pragyan leaves Vikram. Pragyan leaves the womb of Vikram. Let me just twist it all up, right? The biology also up. So Pragyan leaves the womb of Vikram, then goes someplace, then comes back. So who's controlling it? Who's telling Vikram what to do? Who's telling Pragyan what to do and what not to do, and when to come back and not to go too far?
So Pragyan doesn't necessarily need to come back. We've seen in previous lunar rovers, both China and Russian rovers have moved over 10 kilometers and even 37 kilometers on the lunar surface. The commands Pragyan will receive from the Vikram lander. It will be directly in line of sight of the lander. And the lander will be sent commands for Pragyan from Earth.
Yeah, so can I say, I'm sorry to make it so idiot-proofed, I being the idiot. So it's a bit like Vikram is the owner and Pragyan is the dog, controlled on an electronic leash. Is it a bit like that?
Yeah, absolutely. On Earth, we tell Vikram how to control the rover.
Right.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's okay. But basically, Vikram is controlling. Vikram is keeping the rover on a leash. So rover can't just go on wherever it wants to go.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right, and the rover will obviously relay back all the information that it finds back to the lander.
Now, the Americans, the Artemis project that the Americans are coming up with, I think 2025?
25.
They've already started and they'll start landing from 2025-26. Yeah. In 26, the third mission will take humans up.
And it's a human mission.
Yeah.
And they are already training those astronauts. Yeah. So what are the targets or objectives that the Americans have set up? And are they also going to the South Pole?
Yeah, Artemis 3 is going to the South Pole. The first human mission of Artemis 3 will actually be at the South Pole. And their objective, long-term objective, is to basically establish a research and scientific base on the moon so that humans can occupy it. And then
And how long? How long are they going to be there for?
how long they're going to be there, I'm not sure. I don't know if that data is available yet. Yeah, but we know that after 2026, starting with America, people will start sending people to the moon.
Mona, you think there is a race on now?
I think once again it is back, but there is also a good amount of collaboration where right after this we have a collaboration with the Japanese space agency where our experience and their experience will
That's the next program.
Yes.
Like a Chandrayaan-4, but it's called something else. LUPEX. What does LUPEX stand for?
Lunar Polar Exploration Mission.
All right, and what do the Japanese contribute to this mission?
So I believe the lander is
India's, and Japan will contribute both the launch vehicle, the rocket that they're developing, as well as the rover. So this is still in conceptual phase. It's not finalized, and it's not.
When the rover goes out, that will say it's a Sony, is it? Something like that, or it's a Panasonic.
So that's why the success of this mission was kind of crucial. So that takes us a step forward to collaborate with Japan. So I think yes, there is a race where obviously now I think in an earlier live we were talking about this, that it's no longer fantasy to think about humans going to space and setting up colonies. It is a goal that a lot of countries with successful space exploration programs already have and are looking and preparing towards. So that way, definitely. But I think going forward, there is going to be a lot more collaboration because I think ISRO is one place where which all countries look towards for cheaper launches. And that I think can become a strength for
frugal engineering.
Yes.
Now, I know that my fantasizing about a rover carrying a Sony or a Panasonic logo was a joke, but it wasn't that facetious either, because if you look at the American launch that's coming up, that has a very strong private sector participation in it. So Sandhya, tell us about it.
Yeah, so the Artemis missions are going to be launched by SpaceX, which has signed the contract with them.
So SpaceX is Elon Musk.
Elon Musk's, yes.
So I should not have said Mona's Twitter handle. I should have said Mona's X handle is not a scientist. Yes.
But in fact, while there is a robust private space ecosystem in the US and SpaceX has been launching a lot, one of the recent insights from the Ronan Farrow piece about Elon Musk points out how dependent the American government is on SpaceX specifically, more than any other individual company. So that could also play a very big part in why the Artemis mission has been signed up with SpaceX rockets. But yeah, private players are going to be coming into the foray. We already have a lot of private players in India as well, developing 3D printed rockets. We have a private launch pad inside Sriharikota campus as well. So private players will be playing a lot of role soon. Hopefully, they will also start signing up with ISRO within a decade.
But having said that, a lot of all the instruments, the launch vehicles, the rockets, the parts for that, all of that is private industry. ISRO doesn't talk about it that much, but it is like, all of these companies have a huge role to play in that.
Yeah.
So ISRO is not manufacturing them, right? So we already have the capability.
Yeah. Now the rockets. The rocket we are using now is a variant or is a further developed variant of the GSLV, Mohana?
It's just renamed. GSLV has been renamed to Launch Vehicle Mark III now.
LVM3.
LVM3.
Because we used to have PSLV, which is basically a workhorse, right? We launched these dozens and dozens and scores of satellites on PSLV, then GSLV, right? And that's now called?
LVM3.
No, sorry, can I interrupt? We have the PSLV, we have the GSLV Mark 1 and 2. What was called the GSLV Mark III is a whole other class of rocket. So they have named it LVM-3 to avoid confusing it with GSLV. So we do have PSLV, SSLV, GSLV, but the biggest one is the LVM-3 right now.
LVM-3 right now. And is it big enough for our needs, or did I read that the rocket that the Russians used for Luna 25 was actually much bigger than this, or much more powerful than this?
Yes, those rockets have the ability to send spacecraft directly to the moon. They are much bigger and they do have a larger fuel capacity. This also includes like the Saturn rockets that Apollo missions and the US missions are using. Our rockets are indeed smaller and they do carry less fuel, which is why we do the orbit raising as well as orbit lowering maneuvers instead of going directly from Earth's surface to moon surface.
So, do we have a project now to build more powerful rockets?
I don't think that is something that the ISRO is looking at, because I think this idea of being a frugal space space agency is something that they want to sort of work with,
Right.
because that affords them the ability to attract a lot more private customers as well, and do more frequent launches. So that is why we are able to send up so many satellites at a larger frequency. So I think that is a strategy that has worked for ISRO so far, and I think they are wanting to keep with that. I'm not sure what the plan is for Gaganyaan right now, because I believe for that you will need to rethink how we do our launches. Is that right?
Yeah, Gaganyaan is supposed to fly on LVM-3. That's the plan. So the larger rockets are going to be reserved for either going to geosynchronous orbits, carrying extremely heavy payloads, or for interplanetary missions like Earth to Moon or Mars. What ISRO is focusing on from a commercial angle is the SSLV, the even smaller rocket to launch nanosats and CubeSats to low Earth orbit, because those kinds of satellites are becoming more common now. So in fact, SSLV is smaller even than the PSLV, and it will be more cost efficient.
So, one thing that we've often heard about, talked about, is the cryogenic technology, which was considered crucial or critical for these engines. Are these engines, these rockets, using cryogenic technology?
The the LVM-3 is. So there you basically need to have liquefied oxygen. That's the fuel we use. For that you need, it needs to be very cold, basically, in very simple terms. So that is why we need this engine that works in those temperatures.
So, Sandhya, please explain cryogenic technology for me.
It's exactly what Mohana said, in that the fuel uses liquid oxygen.
It's kept extremely cold.
It has oxygen and liquefied gases and liquefied hydrogen. So yeah, this is extremely cold, going down to temperatures of cryogenic fuel is extremely cold, going down to temperatures measured in the minus 100s, and it carries liquid rocket fuel because it's also space saving. When there's liquid fuel, you can store so much more fuel in the rocket than when it is gas, especially fuel components like oxygen and hydrogen. So it enables us to carry more fuel, but in turn requires extreme cold.
Extreme cold. So I will ask the same question to both of you. Each one of you can answer. So when does each one of you think will humankind be able to launch missions from the moon?
I think 20 years.
20 years? And you?
I feel like it's 35 to 50. I mean, let's take into account different countries and their capabilities. So I would say maybe for India, maybe.
Also count Elon Musk in.
My answer comes from the point of view of reusable rockets and 3D rockets. I think we're getting there much quicker. So therefore, I think we might be able to launch from the moon sooner.
All I can say is it will certainly happen in your lifetimes. I hope I live long enough to see it in my lifetimes. So I will just conclude this again with a cheap shot. I don't know, Sandhya, you don't watch Hindi movies, but there was a famous film Pakiza of almost 50 years back, around the same time as the Neil Armstrong landing, thereabouts, which had a famous song, "Chalo Dildar Chalo Chand ke Paar Chalo," and The other one says, "Hum hai taiyar, chalo." So, come sweetheart, let's go beyond the moon. And the other one says, "Of course, I am game." So I think humankind is now getting close to that, particularly if this water is useful and technologies are found and something can be done to make use of it.